Welcome to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe now so you don't miss a drop of straight talk you can't get anywhere else. We discuss the whiskeys to drink, music to listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. I'm your host, Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. Tonight's guest, 48-year career nursing professional, chief nursing officer, and past president of the Association of Leadership Science in Nursing, Dr. Angela Prestia. Hey, what you drinking? Yeah, I've said a couple of times that I can't think of a time in my career, nor can I think of any of my clients describing getting into a situation and it goes incredibly well and it was easy the first time they hit a home run, the first time they stepped up to the plate, and then they said, "Well, let's break that down and see what we can learn from that." Usually, it's those moments where, "Well, that didn't go well at all." And I still don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna try everything not to do that again, right? And it's those moments that, to your point, we tend not to share in our leadership story. I was just reviewing a report today. Report is kind of strong. There was an article on social media that talks about followers tend to value leadership mistakes more so than any other element because it makes the leader seem more personal, more reachable. But yet leaders want to rehearse and practice and make sure everything's perfect and then put out the finished product that's been validated by marketing and their attorneys, and the finances calculated the numbers, and that's when they put it out. And that article was suggesting that is the absolute wrong thing to do. Talk a little bit about how much courage it takes to reveal, hey, look, I've really screwed this thing up, and this is what I learned from it. What kind of courage does that take?
So it's interesting. I did write a chapter in a transformational nursing leadership book, and it is about the courage that is needed, the absolute courage that is needed to lead in challenging times, in chaotic times. And I will speak to healthcare because it is so chaotic and complex now. We have an unprecedented nursing shortage. We have a younger generation who is afraid to go into nursing or healthcare careers because of communicable diseases. What COVID taught them. AIDS didn't teach us that. With AIDS, we went in the 80s, we went back in there. We were armed. We kept going. It didn't prevent us from leaving the profession, but somehow COVID is preventing people from coming into our profession.
Yeah. So just you were talking about just how this is a different time, and that lessons that were too difficult for us to learn before really kind of hit us in the face, and we couldn't ignore it, we couldn't avoid it. What were some of those lessons for you professionally that, although it was rough for you to go through, again, you reflect on it now as you make decision, or as you encourage the newer generation?
So we were talking about the courage that it takes. And, again, going back a little bit in history, stepping aside from nursing, looking at presidents like FDR, who was facing the closure of the banking system, right? And the courage that it took for him to get everybody on board and share his vision, handle the naysayers, and work the program and get the key stakeholders involved. That's really what it takes. You have to be sort of unflappable. Of course you're flappable, but you have to sort of be unflappable. But to your point about not being fearful of sharing failures, you are absolutely right. There is, people will say to you, "Are you a Democratic leader? Are you a leader who is autocratic? Or are you an authentic leader? Are you a transformational leader? Well, being authentic is very, very important. And I don't think we can call ourselves authentic. I think we have to have the courage to get up in front of people and say, I don't know, but I will find out and I will get back to you. And it is in the finding out and getting the truth, the facts, where we are, and then having the accountability to go back and say to the staff, yep, here's the information. Thank you for giving me the time to get it to you. It does make you more human, to your point. And the follower, if I can use that term, sees something of themselves in the leader, and they can relate. Oh my gosh, he's just like me. They have family, they have responsibilities, they forget things, they make to-do lists. And so I do think that people will tend to follow leaders when they are very authentic and very real. And that means, showing your vulnerabilities.
Yeah, yeah. You are reminding me of a book I read. I don't even know when I read this. It was several years ago. I was in several decades ago, actually a couple decades ago. I was in corporate America, and as an organization, the leadership team was asked to read Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. And one of the things that she talks about is that authenticity is not something you have, it's something you choose. And just this idea of you have to choose authenticity. What's your reaction to authenticity is not something you have, it's something you choose?
I couldn't agree with you and the author more. When we talk about leadership communication, which is the crux of all relational management, I mean, relational leadership is communication. We talk about it, I talk about it in terms of being truthful, mindful, and relevant. We have to be truthful. If we don't know, we can say we find out and get back to you. I've seen great orators say, as of this instance, here's the information. Now, my memory may not be good, but as of this moment in time, here's what I know. So that's the truthful part. Mindful is being aware of your audience, right? Of being aware of the choices of words you select to convey the message. One of the examples I like to give is standing up in front of a group of people, a mixed crowd, and saying, the ICU nurses are the backbone of this organization. They've got their central line infections down. I know that's very specific to nursing. But what happens is that you exclude everybody else in the audience, right? So you have to be very mindful and be very aware of who you're speaking to and include everybody, be very inclusive. And then relevant. Let's talk about what they're asking about, not what I think they want to hear, right? Keeping it current, keeping it relevant. So I think that's what makes you authentic. And in nursing, we add one more thing, and that's caring. And you got to care. You got to be compassionate. You're taking care of patients in their most vulnerable stages, whether they're giving birth or whether they're in hospice care at the end of life. They are entrusting you. And so you got to care.
I love the thoughtfulness that you are putting into what it takes to be an effective leader. And although, obviously your background is in nursing, so it's easy for you to draw on examples that might affect or might be applicable to nursing, but there are just so many transferable principles there that everyone should embrace if they are going to really do a good job at being a leader. It's one, any of us can hold a position, we can hold a title. And as I've said before, with the title comes a certain degree of protection against insubordination, right? If you're the manager and you ask someone to do something, I got a pretty good feeling that they're going to at least try to do it. But you're not going to necessarily get the discretionary effort unless you can demonstrate the authenticity as you've described it. I love your approach to that idea of authenticity. Let's talk a little bit about jazz because I want to bring jazz into this conversation as well. And so for me, jazz really comes in when things just aren't going according to plan. I had a plan, and boy, this made sense on paper. This made sense on paper. But when I got into the room, well, that plan is just not going to work. I can see now that's not going to work. I know you're a fan of Bobby Short, iconic, legendary. He's covered some of the most amazing composers from Cole Porter to George Gershwin. Tell me, what is it about Bobby Short that you can appreciate that might factor its way into how we improvise as leaders in the room?
It's about being mindful and relevant, I think. So I have to give a lot of credit to my parents who, at the time they were raising me, both only had a high school education. And yet they had friends of every ethnicity, every religious background that you can think of. They exposed my brother and I to not only musicians like Bobby Short, but Lena Horne, and then I can remember the stereo blasting show tune, South Pacific, and with someone like Bobby Short in a very white bread, lower middle class upbringing, here's someone that is different than us. And, I think being fearful and biases originate from the fear of the unknown. If this person is different than I am. But in actuality, no one is different. We are all the same flesh and blood human beings. And so you gain an appreciation for this music, and it helps inform you later on in life so that when you are faced with different than, it's a great equalizer, right? There's an acceptance there. So my parents loved their date night going into New York City to see Bobby Short, and just gave that love of that music and those musicians and that jazz and those differences to my brother and myself.
It is always fascinating to me how I pull from experiences in my life that were small to the person who was creating those situations. My parents talking at the dinner table when I was just at the dinner table. I mean, I wasn't. They weren't talking to me. I was just at the dinner table, but the conversations they were having, I draw on those conversations today. And it sounds like that's what's going on with you as well, that there are just small things that you get to pull on. I want you to retell this story because you shared with me this idea of the Cascade of Caring and how when you first started your PhD program in nursing, someone came to you, another student came to you and said, "Wow, you are so far away from the bedside. How can you possibly make effective decisions that will impact the patient?" And that's a dilemma that I hear a lot of leaders talk about. That while I started as a salesperson, but now I'm managing VPs as the chief customer officer for a multinational organization. How can I stay in touch with the customer? That kind of thing. Talk a little bit about the significance and what you had to do to make sure that you weren't too far away from the bedside to really represent and inform the folks in your organization.
Oh, thank you for that segue. Then and now, I think that there is this great divide, them and us.
Mm.
The leaders, the managers, the C-suite, the A team, and the staff. And so I was challenged by a nurse that said, you're out of touch. How are you going to affect any change at the bedside as a chief nurse? And so I really thought about this for a while. How can I do that? And I also want to I'm going to explain the cascade of caring of my philosophy, but it is also informed by a conversation that I had. I was very interested in being relevant and continuing to be relevant. And at the time, it was with the millennial generation, even though now we're at Generation Z, who are early careerists. But I asked several millennials, how can I stay relevant? How can I stay current? And this one person in particular said to me, as long as you keep caring, as long as you keep asking the questions, you will stay relevant. And so when I thought about this research, this disconnect between the chief nurse and the bedside nurse, I really developed, along with all of the readings that I was doing and all of the theories that I was processing, what I call the cascade of care. That is, if I care enough about myself, self-care, and that came into the equation late, Galen. That didn't start in the equation. That came after. But if I truly take care of myself, then I am better able to take care of my directors underneath me, who will then role model and see how I do it. And they are better able to take care of their nurse managers, who are then better able to take care of their assistant nurse managers, their shift charge nurses. And so it's this cascade of caring that is like a waterfall almost, if you're going to visualize it, that gets down then to the bedside nurse, who is better able to care for the patient. And that's the connection. I often thought of self-care as a parent, someone saying to me, well, if you're not well and you're not healthy, you can't take care of your children, and that's when they need you. But I never really thought about it career-wise until, recently. And so taking care of yourself is very, very important, and keeping your glass more than half full so that you can give to others and care for them.
Wow. You just touched on something that is becoming a larger part, an increasing part of my practice as an executive coach, and that is the mental well-being. I've heard stories about how a person can think himself into ill health by the words that they use, the things that they think about, the things that they dwell on. They were otherwise they were healthy, but they thought themselves into ill health. What is the significance of mental well-being when it comes to physical health from your perspective?
Oh gosh, it's huge. And I believe you can think yourself into an unhealthy state. So I was famous for it. I would leave work and I would say, Angela, why did you say XYZ? That was the most ridiculous, foolish thing that you could ever. You are such a bad person. And then I realized that this negative self-talk was not helping me. And so you come to realize that in your drive home or your drive to work, thinking about one thing, one tiny little thing, like we said, that conversation around the dinner table, one tiny little positive thing that you did right, that you are proud of, that you can say, yes, I did it. And have positive self-talk. And of course, you have to reflect on and be very emotionally intelligent and self-aware. But when I was younger, Galen, we did not speak about our emotional well-being. We did not speak about that because it drug up all these stigma. We would be an embarrassment to our family, to our culture, to our religion. You just didn't talk about those things. You kept it all inside. You dealt with it as good as you could. But now, this generation, our early careerists and Generation Z, and some younger millennials, they'll flat out tell you, I have ADD. I need this accommodation, and they're so transparent where we weren't. So it's a good conversation. It's a good conversation to have now and to be aware.
Yeah, I have talked to a couple of guests, and we talked about how, 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, if you told anyone that you were seeing a therapist or psychologist, they would look at you and say, "Wow, what's wrong with you? I mean, why do you have to get help?" Today, if you tell them that you're not seeing a therapist, people will say, well, "What's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing? Why aren't you reaching out to somebody? What's wrong? What's the problem?" One of the things you mentioned too is just this idea of this conversation that we're always having with ourselves. And most of the time, those conversations aren't very polite. And there's a book that it's a classic, but I would encourage everyone. It's called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And it's by Shad Himstetter. And the title is What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And it just really brings out the fact that we have approximately 67,000 thoughts per day. And 70 to 80% of those thoughts are negative and self-critical. And 90% of those negative and self-critical thoughts, they aren't even original thoughts. They're the same thoughts that we've been kicking around in our head since the fourth grade. So if you are just going through life thinking that you can do this by yourself, you're really fighting with your hands tied behind your back, because there are just so many things trying to convince you that you're a bad person, and that's not going to help you be successful. Talk a little bit about your invisible board of directors and the role of your invisible board of directors, because I know personally, I've got a list of about 12 people that I will think about in times of great confusion, and I will anticipate how might Stan Hutchin approach this? How might Joe Cavalier approach this? What's the role of having an invisible board of directors or invisible counsel, however you want to phrase it, but just these mental role models that you think about from time to time?
We started this is a great question. And we started the conversation talking about our network, right? Well, our mutual friend, Steve Burkhart. And I think it's very important to have this invisible board of directors and this network. Maybe not so much your closest inner circle, because, your best friend loves you no matter what. And they're just going to be there to support you no matter what. But you really need someone who's going to say, maybe I would have thought to handle it this way or that way. So I have been very fortunate throughout my professional career to have met very early on Dr. Rose Sherman, who I just treasure. She is a nationally known speaker. She works with nurse leaders across the United States. She has written several books, and she just finished, I believe it was a 7-year stint as editor of a journal called Nurse Leader. And her travels took her into many different environments. And it is her wisdom that I will call upon, when I need to really discern how to do something. The other thing, I just want to make a quick point about this second layer or this external network, because sometimes when you are in an organization, you come into a particular challenge or you're in a jam, your first thought may be to go to your work friend, your work wife, your work husband, whatever it is, your support at work. But that might not be the best decision, because you really want to keep them away from the turmoil that might be existing. So going externally is probably a better idea.
Yeah, I like that. One of the things I talk about a lot relative to this idea of building your network. To your point, it might not always be your best friend. It might not always be your work friend. And I have captured that you need to follow the ABCs of managing your career. And the ABCs, the A stands for you need to have professional advisors. So you need to have, an attorney. You need to have a financial advisor. You need to have a therapist. You need to have people who are certified to give you advice in these areas of your life. And this is more than just your friend that read a great article and wants to come and share that article with you. You need to have some professionals, some professional advisors. The B stands for accountability buddies. So you need to have people who understand the industry, they understand the work that you do. They may not be in your same organization, but they get it. And they can give you some support because they understand what you're up against. They understand what the acronyms mean. They understand how difficult it is to make these decisions that you believe are right. They get it. You need to have accountability buddies. That's the B. And then the C is that I believe you need to have a ride or die crew. And these are just your friends. These are people that have known you. They might not even know what you do. They don't really even care about what you do. They're there for you. And I talk about I've got a crew of friends that they know a little bit about what I do, but at the end of the day, they were like, "Yeah, that's pretty tough. Do you have any more of that Glenfiddich? Because I could use a refill." And Galen, here's a new cigar. And I don't know why, but maybe this cigar will help you solve that problem that you just told us about. You need to have that crew that is just there for you. And then the S, because it's the ABCs, is you need to have, especially for your career, you need to have a sponsor that is high enough to be able to direct you, give you some advice, and speak your name in rooms that you might not be able to get into. What's your reaction to the idea of needing to have, a network that encompasses your ABCs?
Galen, I think that's profound, what you have said. I agree with the A's, the C's, and the S. Here's about the buddies, at least in my experience in nursing, and it could be just my personal experience. Some of those buddies, or those that you want to be buddies with, who understand and speak your language, may be competitors and may not want to share, right? Why reinvent the wheel when I can pick up the phone or text and say, "Hey, what are you doing over in your organization?" And so my experience has been that some of them have been hesitant to share that because of fear of market share loss, or, proprietary information. But it's about, you're absolutely right. Your friend will pass the whiskey and give you a cigar and love you no matter what. But it's these other people that can help solve certain situational problems without you having to figure it all out from scratch. The piece about the sponsor is critical. The person who speaks your name when you're not there in the room, that's critical. And I know people who have lost their sponsors because their sponsors have moved away. And perhaps that person who they were sponsoring could not geographically move, right? Were geographically limited. And now they've lost their sponsors and their careers have gotten off track. So wonderful words of wisdom, Galen. Excellent, really.
Well, hey, I got to make sure my game is up to speed if I'm going to have, a doctor. I'm going to be talking to a doctor who's been some places, they've done some things, and they know some stuff. Yeah, I got to think about how can I help, or how can we help our listeners. I can't believe where the time has gone, and I've got to get you in to talk with our VIPs. But before we leave this part of the conversation, I would love for you to share how can people get a hold of you if they want to get some of this insight directed at their situations. I tried my best to share a little bit about your background. If you're a VIP, you're going to have access to our What's Next newsletter, where you can see the totality of Dr. Angela's background. But how can people get a hold of you if they believe that you might be able to help them move through something that they've got going on?
Oh, well, thank you for that. I'm on LinkedIn. It's not hard to find me. The book that I authored that came out in January 2024 is available on Amazon, and it also has my email right on the book. So I'm very accessible should anybody care to chat.
Okay, talk about the book. Before we leave, you got to plug and talk about the book. Maybe we can sell 20 copies or so.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Sharing. So, we talked a little bit about stories. And so I wrote a book. It's called Becoming the Chief Nurse, The Science, the Stories, the Truth. And it was published, as I said, last January. And it's really the first of its kind, if I might say that, because it's a roadmap. It helps us, the different chapters are laid out to help us discern, do we even want to be leaders? Sometimes we're forced into these positions, or, we're next up in the batting order, and, okay, I'll do it, or sometimes you're just like thrilled to be asked to dance and you're no longer a wallflower. But do you really like people? Do you really have that courage to take on and knowing yourself? The book talks about knowing yourself. And it's okay if you know yourself and you don't want to be a leader. That's cool. It talks about building relationships and the importance of context and connections. And so it's based in science, a lot of references as to what's in the literature that supports what I'm saying. And the stories are the stories. I tell the stories of things that happened to me and also of other leaders in nursing and in healthcare. I share their stories kind of anonymously, but I think it's so helpful for people to hear the stories, which are the truth in these people's truths in certain situations. And so I really felt compelled to write it because I thought that the buddies that you were talking about hold back for certain reasons. Not all the buddies, but if they're buddies, they're not going to hold back. But those that you might look towards might hold back. So I thought, heck, I'm not going to hold back. This is what happened to me, and this is what happened to other people. And if we can learn from that and grow together. So it's a culmination of my career and the wisdom that was imparted to me and that I learned.
Dr. Angela Prestia, this has been such a treat. I am just so excited that I'm going to get to spend a little bit more time with you in the VIP room. I'm also incredibly honored, flattered, and humbled that someone like Stephen Burkhart would think so much of me and this show to suggest that we have you as a guest, because this has been absolutely amazing. So if you got a few minutes, for the VIPs?
I do. And thank you again for having me. And I've got a few minutes for the VIP.
All right, well, let's do that. So raise your wine if you got any left. I'll raise my Glenfiddich. And until the next time, cheers. Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.